Amara had always believed that kindness could soften any heart. She came from a small village near Ibadan, where her mother taught her to work hard and be honest no matter what life brought. When she moved to Lagos, she thought she had finally found a place to build a better life. Madame Funk's mansion was big, beautiful, and filled with marble floors and shining lights. Amara worked there as a maid, cleaning the house, washing clothes, and taking care of every small detail. Though her job was tiring, she was always grateful for it. Every morning, she woke up before sunrise, swept the compound, and made breakfast for Madame Funk and her 2 children. The madam hardly noticed her, but Amara didn't mind. She just wanted to earn her small pay and send some money home to her sick mother. But Madame Funk was not an easy woman to please. She shouted at her staff for small mistakes and always reminded them that they were lucky to work for her. Amara often kept quiet, bowing her head when scolded, even when she had done nothing wrong. Her friend Kemi, another maid, sometimes whispered, "Amara, one day this woman will push you too far." Amara only smiled softly and said, "It's fine, Kemi. God sees everything." One Saturday morning, as the sun shone over the compound, Madame Funk suddenly started shouting. "Where is my gold bracelet?" she screamed from her bedroom. The whole house froze. Everyone ran up the stairs, trembling. The bracelet had been a gift from her husband, and she valued it more than anything. She turned to her workers, her eyes full of suspicion. "Who entered my room yesterday?" she demanded. Amara stepped forward quietly. "Ma, I only came in to clean like always," she said in a calm voice. Madame Funk's eyes narrowed. "You cleaned and now my gold is missing. So it's you." Amara gasped. "No, Ma. I swear I didn't take anything." Her heart began to race. She had never stolen a thing in her life. She even refused to take leftover food home without permission. But Madame Funk was not listening. She pointed at Amara and shouted, "You're a thief. I trusted you in my house, and this is how you repay me." The guards came forward immediately. Kemi tried to speak up for her friend, but Madame Funk silenced her with a glare. "If you defend her, you'll lose your job too." Tears rolled down Amara's cheeks as she dropped to her knees. "Please, Ma, I didn't steal it. Maybe it's misplaced. Please let me help you search." "Get out of my sight," Madame Funk shouted, her voice echoing through the hall. "I don't want to see you here again. Take your dirty things and go." Amara's legs felt weak. Her few belongings, a small bag with clothes and an old Bible, were thrown out of the gate. The other workers watched silently, afraid to speak. Even Kemi stood still, her eyes full of sadness but her lips trembling in fear. The sky grew dark and heavy rain began to fall. Amara picked up her bag and slowly walked away from the mansion. Her clothes were soaked, and her shoes sank into the muddy road. She had nowhere to go, no family nearby, and no money in her pocket. As the thunder rolled, she found a small wooden bench by the roadside and sat down, shivering. Her heart felt broken. She whispered softly to herself, "God, why me? I only wanted to work and live right." She thought about her mother back in the village and the medicine she needed. "How will I help her now?" she murmured, hugging her bag close. A few passers-by looked at her but didn't stop. To them she was just another poor girl in the rain. But inside, Amara's pain was deep. She replayed every moment in the mansion, wondering how things had gone so wrong. She remembered how Madame Funk's children laughed when she told them stories, how she helped the cook when he fell sick, how she worked late into the night polishing the floors, and now none of that mattered. One missing bracelet had turned her into a criminal in everyone's eyes. Night came quickly and the streets grew quiet. Amara tried to find shelter under a shop's veranda. She was cold and hungry. Her stomach growled but she ignored it. She thought of her mother's words, "When people lie about you, keep your heart clean. God will fight for you." Those words gave her a little strength. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer. "Lord, please don't let this be the end of my story." As the rain continued to fall, Amara drifted into a light sleep, her clothes still wet and her heart still heavy. But even in her pain she refused to curse Madame Funk. Instead she prayed for her, hoping one day the truth would come out. By morning the city began to wake. Cars honked, traders set up their stalls and the smell of fried yam filled the air. Amara stood up slowly, weak but determined. She looked at the busy road ahead and said to herself, "I can't give up. Maybe life has another plan for me." She started walking, not knowing where she was going, her eyes red but her spirit unbroken. People passed by, some glancing at her with pity, others ignoring her completely. She walked for hours until her legs began to ache. At a small junction, she saw a little child crying beside a fruit stand. The boy's mother had stepped away, and a cart had knocked over his basket of oranges. Without thinking, Amara knelt down and helped him gather the fruits. The boy looked at her and smiled through his tears. In that small moment, something warm flickered in Amara's heart. Helping others reminded her who she truly was: kind, gentle, and honest. No false accusation could take that away from her. She didn't know that this small act of kindness would soon lead her to the person who would change her life forever. But for now she only knew one thing: she would not give up, no matter how hard life became. As she walked down the road again, the morning sun broke through the clouds. The light touched her face, drying the last of her tears. Amara looked up at the sky and smiled weakly. "Thank you, God," she whispered. "I may have lost my job, but not my faith." And with that she kept walking, unaware that destiny was already waiting just a few miles ahead. Amara woke up that morning feeling dizzy and weak. Her stomach ached from hunger, and her head throbbed from the rain she had slept under all night. The sun had barely risen, but the streets were already noisy with cars and people rushing to work. She tried to stand, but her legs felt heavy. She hadn't eaten anything since the morning before, and her throat was dry. She sat near a dusty roadside, clutching her small bag to her chest. Her eyes were tired and her body trembled. People passed by, but no one stopped to help. Some looked at her with pity, while others turned away as if she were invisible. Amara tried to smile at a woman selling bread and asked softly, "Please, can I have just one piece? I'll pay you later." The woman frowned and waved her away. Amara's vision began to blur. The noise of the city faded, and all she could hear was the faint beating of her heart. She tried to move but couldn't. Then everything went dark. A few minutes later, a black car stopped near where she lay. The driver stepped out, followed by a tall young man dressed neatly in a white shirt. His name was David. He was the only son of the president, but no one around knew that. David was on his way to visit one of his father's charity projects in the city when he noticed a small crowd by the roadside. Curious, he stepped closer. "What happened?" he asked. "Some poor girl fainted," a man replied carelessly. "She's been sitting here since morning." David's eyes softened when he saw Amara lying motionless on the ground. Her clothes were wet and torn, and her lips were pale. Without hesitation he bent down and checked her pulse. "She's still breathing," he said quickly. "Help me get her into the car." The driver hesitated. "Sir, are you sure? She looks—" David cut him off. "She's a human being. Let's go." They gently lifted Amara and laid her in the back seat. David told the driver to head straight to the nearest clinic. He sat beside her, watching as her chest rose and fell weakly. He didn't know who she was, but something in her face touched him, a kind of innocence and quiet pain that made him want to help her. When they arrived at the clinic, the nurses rushed to take her inside. David paid for the treatment without question. He waited outside the ward, pacing back and forth as doctors checked her. He wasn't used to feeling anxious, but for some reason he couldn't leave her there alone. After an hour, a nurse came out and said, "She's awake now. You can see her." David entered the small room. Amara was lying on the bed, her eyes half open. She looked around, confused, then saw him standing by her side. His face was calm and his eyes were kind. "Where am I?" she asked weakly. "You're safe now," David said softly. "You fainted on the road. I found you and brought you here." Amara blinked, trying to remember what had happened. Her heart filled with gratitude. "Thank you, sir," she whispered. "You didn't have to help me." David smiled. "Sometimes we don't need a reason to help someone." Amara's eyes filled with tears. "People walked past me all morning. No one cared." "Maybe they were too busy," he said gently. "But I believe God led me there for a reason." She nodded slowly, holding back tears. "I don't even know your name." "My name is David," he said. "And you?" "Amara," she replied softly. "I used to work as a maid, but I was accused of something I didn't do. They threw me out." David frowned. "That's terrible. But don't worry, Amara. You'll be fine now." He went to the nurse's desk and paid for more medication and food. When the food arrived, he helped her sit up and eat slowly. It was the first proper meal she had in days. Her hands shook as she held the spoon, but David stayed by her side patiently. When she finished eating, she looked at him with tired but grateful eyes. "You've done so much for me, yet you don't even know me." David smiled again. Sometimes helping a stranger gives more peace than helping a friend. The nurse came in and told Amara she would need to rest for at least one night. David nodded and said he would cover all her bills. Before leaving, he placed a small brown envelope on the table beside her bed. "There's some money here," he said. "Use it when you get discharged." Amara stared at the envelope, shocked. I can't take that. You can, David said kindly. Think of it as a gift, not charity. She hesitated, then said softly, You have a good heart, David. May God bless you. He smiled and nodded, then quietly left the room. Later that evening, as Amara lay in bed, she couldn't stop thinking about the stranger who had helped her. She wondered who he really was. His clothes were neat and his car looked expensive. But he didn't act proud like rich men often did. He spoke gently and treated her with respect, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Meanwhile, David sat in his car, looking out of the window as the city lights flickered. His driver asked, Sir, should we go to the charity office now? David shook his head. Not today. I'll go tomorrow. He was deep in thought. He couldn't understand why that girl's face wouldn't leave his mind. There was something about her strength, even in weakness, that moved him. Back in the clinic, Amara whispered a prayer before sleeping. Thank you, God, for sending me an angel. The next morning she woke up feeling stronger. The doctor told her she could leave later that day. She asked the nurse if the man who helped her had returned. No, the nurse said. But he left his contact number just in case you need help. Amara looked at the small piece of paper and smiled. David, she said softly, holding it close. When she stepped out of the clinic later that afternoon, she looked around at the busy road. The world seemed a little brighter. For the first time in days she felt hope again. She found a small bench under a tree and sat quietly, thinking about her life. She still had no home and no job, but something inside her told her that this was not the end. Maybe her meeting with David had a purpose. Far away in the president's villa, David walked through the garden, thinking about Amara. His mother, the first lady, called out, David, you seem distracted today. What's wrong? He smiled slightly. Nothing, Mama. I just met someone special. She raised her eyebrows. Special? Who? He only smiled and said, just someone who reminded me that kindness still matters. That night, as the stars shone over Lagos, two hearts, one rich, one poor, thought of each other with silent gratitude. Neither knew what destiny was preparing for them. But both had already changed, even in small ways. Amara slept peacefully for the first time in days, whispering David's name with a smile. And David, looking out at the night sky, prayed quietly, hoping that somehow he would see her again. A week after Amara left the clinic, she sat under a tree, wondering what to do next. She had little money left from the envelope David had given her. Lagos was busy and loud, but she felt small in the middle of it all. She wanted to work again to rebuild her life, but no one trusted a girl with no reference or home. Still, she believed God had a plan. One afternoon her phone rang. It was an unknown number. When she answered, a calm voice said, Hello, Amara? It's David. Her heart skipped a beat. She sat up quickly and smiled, though he couldn't see her. Oh, David. Good afternoon, sir, she said politely. I was wondering if you found somewhere to stay, he asked. Not yet, she admitted. I've been looking for work, but it's hard. There was a short pause before he said, Come to my office tomorrow morning. I may have something for you. The next day, Amara arrived at the address he sent. It was a beautiful compound with a large sign that read Hope Hands Foundation. Children played in the yard, laughing and chasing one another. Volunteers were handing out food and books. Amara stopped at the gate, amazed. She didn't expect David to run such a place. When he walked out to meet her, he wasn't wearing fancy clothes, just a simple shirt and jeans, a warm smile on his face. You came, he said. Yes, sir, she replied shyly. This place is beautiful. What do you do here? He gestured toward the children. We help poor families, orphans, and street kids. We give them food, education, and hope. Amara's eyes softened. That's wonderful. David nodded. I need someone honest and kind to help care for the children, to teach them, feed them, and keep them happy. Would you like that? Amara's eyes widened. Me? Work here? Yes, David said simply. I saw how gentle you are. These children need someone like you. Amara blinked back tears. Thank you, sir. I'll do my best. I promise. And she did. From that day forward, Amara worked at the foundation with all her heart. Every morning she helped the little ones with their lessons. She sang with them, told them stories, and listened to their worries. She taught them manners and hope. The children loved her. They called her Auntie Amara and followed her everywhere. The staff respected her too because she never complained and always found joy in helping others. Even when she was tired, she smiled. David often came to check on the center. He would stand quietly and watch as Amara played with the children. There was something peaceful about her presence, something that made the whole place brighter. One afternoon, while serving food to the children, Amara looked up and saw David watching her. She smiled. "You shouldn't just stand there, sir. Come help us." He laughed and rolled up his sleeves. "Yes, ma'am." Together they handed out plates and laughed as the children shouted happily. For a moment they forgot their different worlds, one from the streets, one from the palace. As the days passed, people began to notice David's growing interest in the foundation. Journalists started following him around, curious about his quiet life. They knew his father was the president, but David preferred to stay out of the spotlight. He didn't want people to see him as just another rich man. He wanted to make a real difference. But one sunny afternoon, everything changed. Amara was helping the children paint pictures when she noticed a crowd gathering outside the gate. Reporters were shouting and taking pictures. The staff rushed to see what was happening. A loud voice shouted, "There he is, the president's son." Cameras flashed as David stepped out of the office, surprised and a little annoyed. Amara froze. The president's son? Her brush dropped to the ground. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. The children clapped and cheered, not understanding what it meant. "Uncle David is famous," they shouted. David smiled gently and waved at them, then turned to the reporters. "Please not here. This is a place for peace, not noise." The journalists eventually left, leaving behind whispers and excitement. Amara stood silently by the corner, her heart racing. When David walked back inside, she looked at him in disbelief. "You're the president's son?" she asked softly. He looked down for a moment, then met her eyes. "Yes, Amara. I am." She took a small step back. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want that to matter," he said. "I wanted you to see me for who I am, not for my family's name." Amara didn't know what to say. She had spoken to him freely, without fear, thinking he was just a kind man. Now everything felt strange. David noticed her unease and smiled gently. "I'm still the same man who found you on the road. Nothing has changed." Amara looked at him quietly. "It's just hard to believe. I thought people like you lived far from people like me." He shook his head. "You're wrong. Kindness doesn't belong to the rich or poor. It belongs to those who choose it." His words made her heart soften. She smiled slowly. "You're right, David. You haven't changed at all." "Good," he said, smiling back. "Then promise me you'll stay. The children need you." Amara nodded. "I'll stay. This place feels like home." From that day the charity center grew even more popular. Donations poured in after the media showed David working with the poor. But David always told the reporters that the real hero was Amara. "She's the heart of this place," he said proudly. Amara tried to stay humble. When people praised her, she said, "I'm just doing what anyone with love should do." Despite the fame, she still lived simply, walking to work, sharing her food, and spending her evenings teaching children to read. Sometimes, David would sit with her after the children went to bed. They would talk about life, dreams, and faith. Amara told him stories about her mother and her village. David listened closely, admiring her strength. One night he said softly, "You know, you've taught me something, Amara." She looked at him curiously. "What's that?" "That helping people isn't about money or power. It's about heart," he said. Amara smiled. "And you've taught me that even powerful people can be humble." They both laughed quietly, the sound of crickets filling the air. But deep inside, Amara still wondered if she truly belonged in his world. She knew he came from power and privilege, and she was just a maid who had lost everything. Still, David never treated her as less. One afternoon, as Amara watched the children play, she thought about how far she had come, from being thrown out into the rain to standing in a place filled with love and laughter. She whispered to herself, "God didn't forget me after all." Little did she know, her journey was just beginning. Life was about to test her heart again, and the truth about her past would soon return in unexpected ways. But for now, she felt peace, surrounded by children's laughter, sunshine, and the kindness of a man whose heart saw beyond status or wealth. And even though she now knew he was the president's son, to her, he was still just David, the man who stopped his car one morning and changed her life forever. One evening, the Hope Hands Foundation hosted a charity event. The hall was filled with guests, cameras, and smiling children dressed neatly in new clothes. Amara stood beside David, welcoming people and helping the kids perform a song they had practiced for weeks. It was a big day for the center. Reporters had come to cover the story about the foundation's work. As the children sang, David watched proudly. He whispered to Amara, "You've done well. Look how happy they are." Amara smiled, her eyes shining. "It's not me alone, David. We all did this together. The event was broadcast on national television that night. The video showed David feeding the children and Amara teaching them how to read. Everyone admired her gentle nature and the way she treated the children like her own. But far away in her luxurious mansion, Madame Funk was watching the same program. When she saw Amara's face on the screen, her eyes widened in shock. "That girl," she shouted. "That's the maid I threw out." Her daughter walked into the room. "Who, Mama?" "That thief," Madame Funk snapped. "The one who stole my gold bracelet. How dare she appear on TV like a saint?" Her pride burned. She couldn't stand the thought of the same girl she had accused now being praised by everyone. Out of anger, she picked up her phone and called a friend who worked as a journalist. "Let me tell you something," she said coldly. "That girl, Amara, is not who you think she is. She was a thief in my house. She stole from me and ran away." The next morning, Amara arrived at the foundation as usual, not knowing anything had happened. But when she walked in, she noticed people whispering. Some volunteers looked at her with doubt. One woman quietly showed her a newspaper headline. Amara's hands trembled as she read it: "Charity worker exposed as former maid accused of theft." Beneath the headline was a photo of her smiling beside David. Her heart dropped. She couldn't breathe for a moment. "This can't be happening," she whispered. David entered the room a few minutes later. He saw her holding the paper and immediately understood. "Amara, don't panic," he said firmly. "I'll handle this." Tears filled her eyes. "David, it's her, Madame Funk. She's the one who threw me out. She's lying again." David placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "I believe you, Amara. You don't need to prove anything to me. But everyone will think I'm a thief again," she said softly. "Then we'll show them the truth," he replied. By noon, the story had spread across social media. Some people supported Amara, but others doubted her. The foundation's board began to receive calls from donors asking questions. The stress was heavy, but David stood strong beside her. That afternoon, a group of reporters gathered outside the foundation's gate. "Amara, is it true you were accused of theft?" one shouted. Amara looked nervous but stood straight. "Yes," she said quietly. "I was accused once, but I did not steal anything." David stepped beside her and faced the cameras. "I know her well," he said firmly. "She is honest, kind, and hardworking. I trust her completely. We will not let lies destroy what she has built here." His words went viral. People admired how he defended her, and many began to question the old story. Meanwhile, David used his influence to open a quiet investigation. He contacted the police station in the area where Madame Funk lived and requested records of the case. To his surprise, there had never been an official report, only Madame Funk's word. He then sent 2 investigators to speak with Madame Funk's former staff. One of them, a driver who had recently quit, revealed something shocking. "Sir," he said, "the bracelet wasn't stolen by Amara. It was taken by another maid, Titi." Madame Funk found out weeks later but didn't want to admit she was wrong. David's expression hardened. "You're sure?" "Yes, sir." Madame Funk paid Titi off to keep quiet. David thanked the man and immediately called the media. "Prepare a statement," he told his assistant. "We're clearing Amara's name today." That evening, the news aired a follow-up story. It showed evidence from the investigation and interviews with Madame Funk's former workers. The truth came out. Another maid had stolen the bracelet, not Amara. When the report aired, people across the country reacted with outrage. Social media filled with messages supporting Amara and condemning Madame Funk for lying. The next morning, Madame Funk's mansion was surrounded by journalists. They shouted, "Madame Funk, why did you lie? Why did you destroy an innocent girl's name?" She tried to hide, but the truth could no longer be covered. That same evening, she appeared on television, her face pale. I made a mistake," she said shakily. "I accused the wrong person. Amara is innocent." When Amara saw the apology on TV, she couldn't believe it. Tears rolled down her cheeks. This time they were tears of relief. She whispered, "Thank you, God. The truth has spoken." David smiled proudly. "I told you, Amara. Lies don't last forever. Truth always wins." The next day, people from all over came to the foundation to show support. Flowers, gifts, and letters poured in. Some donors even increased their contributions, saying they believed in Amara's goodness. One woman hugged her tightly and said, "You're an inspiration. You never fought with anger, you fought with patience." Amara smiled humbly. "I only prayed. God did the rest." Even Madame Funk came to the foundation personally a few days later. She stepped out of her car looking ashamed. People stared as she approached Amara, who stood quietly by the gate. "Amara," she said softly, lowering her head. "I came to apologize. I was wrong. I let my pride blind me. Please forgive me." Amara looked at her for a long moment. She remembered the night she was thrown out into the rain, the humiliation, the hunger, and the pain. But she also remembered her mother's words, "A kind heart is stronger than a proud one." Finally she said gently, "I forgive you, madam. May this be a lesson for both of us." Madame Funk's eyes filled with tears. She nodded slowly. "Thank you," she whispered before leaving quietly. From that day on, Amara's name became a symbol of truth and resilience. News stations invited her to share her story. People admired her calmness, her forgiveness, and her strength. At the foundation, things returned to normal. The children still laughed, the volunteers still worked, and Amara still led with love. David often told her, "You faced storms that would break most people, but you still shine." She smiled and replied, "That's because I learned that pain doesn't last, but grace does." Their bond grew stronger. Though life had tested her with lies, it had also rewarded her with truth, respect, and friendship that was pure. And as the sun set behind the foundation one evening, Amara looked at the children running and playing, her heart full of peace. She had been accused, rejected, and broken, but now she was free, stronger than ever, and loved by all. Months passed, and the storm that once surrounded Amara finally cleared. Her name was now spoken with respect everywhere. Newspapers wrote about her courage, schools invited her to speak, and people admired her for staying humble even after everything she had gone through. Yet Amara didn't let fame change her. She still came to the foundation early every morning, helping the children dress, serving them breakfast, and teaching them to read. She often said softly, "I was once like you." Never stop believing that life can change. One bright afternoon, David called her into his office. "Amara," he said with a smile, holding a white envelope, "there's something you need to see." Amara looked at him curiously and opened the envelope. Inside was a letter with the seal of the presidential office. Her eyes widened as she read it aloud. "The President of Nigeria is pleased to grant Amara Chike a full scholarship to complete her studies at Lagos University for her dedication to humanity." She gasped. "David, this can't be real." He chuckled. "It's very real. My father was touched by your story. He said people like you deserve every chance to grow." Tears filled her eyes. She placed her hand over her mouth, overwhelmed. "I don't know what to say. Thank you so much." David shook his head gently. "Don't thank me, Amara. You earned it with your heart." That evening, Amara knelt by her bed, tears still in her eyes, and whispered a prayer of gratitude. "God, you took me from the streets to a place of honor. May my life always serve others." She began her studies a month later. Even though she was older than most of her classmates, she worked harder than anyone. She studied late at night, volunteered at the foundation on weekends, and helped her fellow students with their lessons. Many admired her for her kindness and strength. Whenever people asked why she worked so hard, she always smiled and said, "Because someone once believed in me when I had nothing." During her final year, she graduated top of her class. The entire foundation staff and the children came to watch her receive her degree. As she walked across the stage, wearing her graduation gown, the audience stood and clapped. David, sitting in the front row beside his parents, smiled proudly. The president himself presented her the certificate, saying, "You are a symbol of hope for this nation." Amara bowed slightly and replied, "Thank you, sir. I will continue to serve my country and its children." After graduation, Amara returned to the foundation, not as a helper this time but as its new head. David announced it at a small ceremony, saying, "No one deserves this more than Amara. She has turned pain into purpose, and her light now guides us all." The children cheered and surrounded her, hugging her legs and calling her Auntie Amara. She smiled warmly, her heart full of joy. "This place saved me," she said quietly. "Now I will make sure it saves others too." Under her leadership, the foundation grew quickly. She built new classrooms, opened a small clinic, and started a feeding program for poor families. She made sure no child went to bed hungry or felt unloved. Every morning she would walk among them, greeting each one by name. "You are special," she would tell them. "You can be anything." David often watched her from a distance, his heart full. He admired not only her beauty but her spirit, gentle, strong, and full of grace. Over time, their bond deepened into something more than friendship. One evening, as the sun set behind the city, David invited her to the garden behind the foundation. It was quiet and peaceful, the air filled with the sound of children laughing inside. Amara turned to him and smiled. You wanted to talk? David nodded. He looked nervous for the first time in a long while. Then he took her hands softly. Amara, the day I found you on the road, I didn't know it would change my life forever. You've taught me what kindness really means. I don't want to imagine this journey without you. Her heart raced. She stared at him, speechless. He continued, his voice gentle. Amara, will you marry me? Tears filled her eyes again, but this time they were tears of joy. She smiled and whispered, Yes, David. 1,000 times yes. The news of their engagement spread quickly. People across the country celebrated them, the humble maid and the president's son. But David and Amara wanted no lavish wedding. They decided on a small ceremony, held in the garden of the foundation where their story had begun. On the wedding day, the children wore white clothes and sang happily as Amara walked down the simple flower path. She wore a modest cream dress, her hair tied neatly, and her face glowing with peace. David stood waiting under an arch of roses, smiling as she approached. When they exchanged vows, Amara's voice trembled. I was once lost and broken, but you showed me that love can heal. I promise to walk with you in truth and kindness always. David smiled softly. And I promise to stand by you, to help you continue the work that has touched so many lives. After the ceremony, they didn't host a grand feast in a hotel or palace. Instead, they celebrated with the children at the foundation. There was laughter, dancing, and music everywhere. The children made a big banner that said, Congratulations Uncle David and Auntie Amara. As the night grew quiet, Amara stood outside looking at the stars. David joined her and placed his arm around her shoulder. What are you thinking about? He asked. She smiled. About the day Madame Funk threw me out into the rain. I thought my life was over that day. He looked at her gently. But that's how your story began. Amara nodded slowly. Yes. Sometimes being thrown out is how life throws you into your true purpose. David squeezed her hand. You've turned pain into power, Amara. I'm proud of you. She leaned her head on his shoulder. We did it together, David. Years later, Amara continued to lead the foundation with even more passion. She opened branches in different cities, helping thousands of children go to school. She often told her story to inspire others. Don't hate your pain, she would say to the young ones. It might be the path to your destiny. People across the country began to call her the Mother of Hope. Her photo hung in schools, and her foundation became one of the biggest in Africa. Yet, she never forgot the street corner where David had first found her. Every year, she went back there quietly to pray and give food to the homeless. When people asked her why she did that, she always smiled. Because I was once one of them. And someone stopped to help me. Her life became a living story, from a poor maid who was thrown out to a woman who changed lives across the nation. And every time she walked through the foundation gates, hearing the laughter of children, she felt grateful all over again. Amara's journey taught everyone who knew her that kindness, forgiveness, and faith could lift anyone, no matter how low they had fallen. And so, her story ended not in tears but in blessings, the kind that came from a heart that never stopped believing. The end.